in terms of goals scored, Limerick have only scored 4 so far this year, Shane. But as we saw in 2020, out of the 5 championship games they played, they only scored goals in one of them. So, and that was against Tipperary, actually. So it just shows that they can beat all comers without scoring goals. But they've, like Tipperary, used 30-plus players this year, and they're looking in root health. The one game they lost was against Cork when they basically took off a load of their frontline players when they were in a very comfortable position. So all the suggestions are that Limerick are in top form.
They are, and I think I mentioned maybe hopefully the worst case scenario for Tip this weekend would be a heavy loss. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if John Kiley thinks, okay, and I think John Kiley, he works in Tip Town, he's on the border there, Galway, Leharlow. I think he has ferocious respect for Tipperary, and if he thinks he can maybe puncture the Tip balloon a small bit, I think he'll try and take it. But it's like there's Limerick, I suppose the overused cliche, Limerick never feared Tip, but there's ferocious respect, and I think there would be an element of that. Jesus, like Tip could come out of nowhere and maybe do something, and like Kylie and Liam Cahill have come up with each other for the last 3 years at Waterford, so I wouldn't be surprised if Limerick go full strength this weekend, or maybe as close to their best 15. I think Young English and Shane O'Brien are playing tonight for Waterford, so that means they can't play on Saturday. They know that you can't play more than 3 games in 7 days, so I assume that means they can't play Saturday. So but I wouldn't be surprised if Limerick maybe think, okay, it's a league semi-final, but it do no harm maybe to get inside Tipperary's heads going into the summer, maybe put them down a step or two, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron Gillane scored 1-5 the other day against Wexford, and Wexford were, Dara Egan is delighted to have a long break, that he doesn't have any knockout games left in the league because he just needs to get players back out on the pitch. But Gillane scored 1-5, 5 of those were frees, but he's been a bane of Tipperary's existence in the last number of years. He's so good. I think this is a great chance for Tipperary to see, right, who will we put Mark and Aaron Gillane come this summer? Also, Kyle Hayes, what are we going to do about him, Liam? So, there's an awful lot to be gained from this game outside of the result and outside of maybe getting to a league final.
That's right, yeah. And the one thing I worry about a Saturday night is playing under lights. Are all the players comfortable under, especially if it's a wet night? And the weather forecast from what we see isn't great going down towards the weekend, and that could decide. That could decide the game. A turnover, a simple loss of possession, and hopefully Limerick will be losing possession, and Tipperary can benefit from it. That's one thing I worry about. I prefer this game was played in daylight, and give everyone a fair chance.
Yeah, Shane, if I'm John Kiley, I'm probably delighted to get an opportunity to come up against Liam Cahill's Tip team. Obviously, he's come up against Liam Cahill before as Waterford manager. He's come up against these Tipperary players, or a lot of them, before. But as much as Liam Cahill is delighted to get a test, so too is John Kiley.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, sure, what they played Cork and the other group, and they played Clare, they've come up against Waterford the last few years. So, I think he'd be first to know that even though arguably Tip's best performance in the championship last year was against Limerick, Tip were well in that game after an hour, and give Limerick a lot. I thought tactically, probably Tip played pretty well in that game, but I think we would be a lot stronger on Saturday night, assuming if Tip go as strong as they can forward start, and maybe Bonner Maher start. And it'll be. I'm not getting too hung up on maybe what's Tip's best starting 15, particularly in the forward line, because I do think now that Liam Cahill has options. That does he need a certain type of a forward to play against Clare? But maybe against Cork, he might go a different way. Maybe he needs a different type of a forward to start. Mark Keogh can do a different job to a John McGrath or a Sean Ryan. Just he can afford now maybe to mix up his forward line if he feels he needs something different for different opponents. So I definitely think Liam Cahill is going to take the opportunity this weekend to see. Look, if we assume the Limerick half-back line is going to have Kyle Hayes on one wing, like who's going to be on him? Is it going to be Seamus Kennedy tracking him and going up and down the field with him? Is it who's going to be midfield? I thought Conor Stapleton played very well in midfield against Limerick last year. Will it be Alan Tynan again? Will he go back to Bonner Maher like he did against Waterford, or will we hold Bonner Maher in reserve for the summer and maybe give John McGrath another start? So it'd be fascinating to see how they go. Then you have the cornerback situation, like you see, you're assuming Cathal Barrett will be back for Clare, but Gillan at the top of his game is probably the hardest inside forward to mark. So if it's Johnny Ryan or if it's Owen Conley, or could even be Brian O'Mara, like he could mix this up an a good few ways. You just know what way Liam Cahill could be thinking.
Like if Aaron Gillan and Seamus Flanagan are both starting in the full forward line in this game, and maybe they will in summer, I could see Breen and Brian O'Mara as the two lads to match up with them. They're both athletic, they're both strong, they're both decent in the air. So to me, like, that makes sense. And if that's the plan for the summer, I get it. Just even to look at some of the scorers.
Brian O'Mara, Shane, has been playing fantastic hurling this year. He's a brilliant man to dispossess an opponent. And I was just watching Tipperary against Waterford. I think they learned a lot from the game below in Mallow in the Munster League. The Tipperary forwards absolutely frustrated the living daylights out of the Waterford players, because every time a Waterford defender went upfield to provide a support, a Tipperary player was going with him, and he frustrated me. Yeah. He ran across his path. He did everything possible to frustrate him. And look at Liam Cahill has learned a lot from that Waterford game, and I'm sure he knows what he's going to do against Limerick as well.
Yeah, okay, so just to look at the scorers I'll start off with Limerick this year in the league, and they've used a lot of players, like we said. Tom Morrissey has 22 points, Mike Houlihan has 17, Donegal O'Dowd, he's come in 1-9, Kyle Hayes 1-6, Aaron Gillan 1-6. For Tipperary then, Jason Ford has scored 231, and only 19 of that is placed balls. Gerard O'Connor, 33 points, 20 of those placed balls. So they're both scoring well from play. Then Jake Morris, 5-5. Conor Bowe, 3-3. John McGrath, 9 points, only one of those from a free. Shane, that all reads pretty well.
Oh, it does, yeah. But they're going to come up against the ultimate test this weekend, where, like, Limerick get numbers back. Tom Morrissey, Gerard Hegarty probably spend as much time in the half back line as doing the half forward line. So, like, how are they? Tip need to play very, very quick, but they need to be precise. That they can't go back to the start of the second half against Waterford, where the ball went in direct, but it was coming out twice as quick. Like Ty de Borca hand was wore off him coming out with the ball. So they've got to be more precise with how they're sending the ball in, and then how they've got to make sure. I don't think Tip will be as naive as Galway were with Limerick when they sort of allow Barry Nash to be the free man. Barry Nash is so important off the sharp hookouts. He was originally a half forward. He's a ball player out of the corner back. So I think Tipperary will push. I think they'll push. Well, I think they won't allow him to be free, and I think they'll try and push right up in Limerick as much as they can. They'll probably allow maybe Seamus Kennedy and maybe Grod and Tynan maybe to drift back, but there could be as many as 4 forwards as maybe scoring forwards as all Tip will be having the field. But they've got to make sure that Barry Nash can't beat them.